Hey, church. I hope you're still tuning in. Hope you haven't kind of lost traction. You're still, keeping the path, staying the course as we are just taking time this Lent season to pour our heart into what Christ would have for us as we prepare our hearts, our minds, our emotions for Easter. Have you ever felt like you were being tested by God? You ever been like, all right, can you lighten up a little bit? Like if it feels like just another test after another test, or maybe it feels like he promises you something and then you get the promise and then it's almost like he's asking you to give up the promise that he already provided for you. Well, I want you to know you're not alone in that. There's this amazing story in scripture that you're probably already going to in your mind. It's found in Genesis chapter 22, and it's about Abraham and his son Isaac. And God promised Abram and his wife Sarah that they would have a son, and he didn't give it to him right away. Took a long time, but then she did get pregnant, and they did have a son named Isaac that God promised them would happen, and now it's come to fruition. And Isaac is a young boy, 13, 14, right about to get into that age where they start having those talks about what it's going to look like for him to be the man of the house. And God promises Abraham that all of the world will be blessed through his offspring. And so every time he's out with his son Isaac, he's thinking, man, I just can't wait for what God's going to do through you, son. You have no idea. He's going to bless the entire world through you. And then there's this moment that I want to read to you. It's found in Genesis chapter 22. So keep that in mind about how Abraham's thinking about his son Isaac. And it says, sometime later, God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, here I am. Abraham replied. God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will tell you about. Early the next morning, Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he sent out for the place that God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, you stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there, and we're going to worship, and then we'll come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, and he placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father? Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and the wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, in prophetic manner, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and he took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me, listen to these words, your son, your one and only son. In other words, real love looks like when you're willing to sacrifice your one and only son. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over, took the ram, and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Abraham had a very interesting task before him, yet with unwavering faith, he just believed that in the middle of this test, God would provide a way out. And maybe right now, life feels like a test to you. You didn't know that a way has been provided. A very clear way out has been provided. And it doesn't come as quickly as we would like for it to come, but it doesn't make the promise any less true. That just as Abraham, in being tested, got his son as one and only son, a promise that God had given him, probably one of the most, if not the most precious thing to him ever in his life, his son Isaac, and asks him to sacrifice him. He tells him, I want you to go to a mountain. Go up to the mountains of Moriah, and I'll show you which one. It doesn't specify exactly which one here, but do you know that Jesus, when he was crucified on that mountain range? And I can't help but wonder if it wasn't perhaps the mountain. We also see Abraham giving his son Isaac the wood to carry up to the place of sacrifice. And we see Jesus bearing his cross up the mountain to Golgotha. And then in the moment when the sacrifice was about to happen, God provided the sacrifice. And it's interesting that, of course, he mentioned that what love looks like is the sacrifice of your son, your one and only son. And he provided a ram caught in the thickets. Now, a ram, the only way a ram gets caught in thickets is if it's in the thorns around its head. And we see on the cross Jesus with a crown of thorns on his head. There are just way too many things here. And God orchestrated this entire story knowing how it would come about, not only to strengthen the faith of Abraham, but to show us all of these things that I've put together, they don't happen on accident. And I've had this thing prepared and taken care of from the very beginning. In fact, I want to show you that I've put together a story hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before my son will ever be on the planet, to show you that I love you so much that I'm going to sacrifice my son, my one and only son. And he is going to be provided. And he will do so willingly. He will lay his life down for each and every person. And so maybe this life feels like a test, but you need to know that all of the things needed for you to get through all of this has already been provided for you. None of it is on accident. Everything you're going through has a purpose and a meaning. And during this Lent season, it may be the time for you to just spend some thoughtful prayer in that, figuring out, God, what are you teaching me? How are you testing me in this? I already trust that you're going to get me through it, but I want to know the lesson. What do I need to know now that's going to get me through what's coming next? And Abraham's faith here grew exponentially when he saw God provide. When he asked him to sacrifice his son and yet provided a ram in the thicket, his faith grew exponentially for him to go through the next trial and the next trial. And then once again, we see God faithfully giving everything to Abraham that he promised that he would. A name that would be known through all generations. And through Abraham, all generations would be blessed. And you can trace Christ's lineage, of course, all the way back to the lineage of Abraham. And of course, there's no one on earth that doesn't know the name of Abraham. And so I just want to build you up, encourage you, trust him in the middle of the test, that a sacrifice has already been provided. And that sacrifice is the one thing that you can always lean into, even when this world feels like it's out of sorts and you don't know what to do. You can take the next right step because you know that the way has already been provided. The path has already been cut clear and the sacrifice has already been made. And so you can trust. You can trust in the God who always provides exactly what we need when we need it. Well, I hope to see you guys Sunday. Love you guys. And I hope you're enjoying this Lent season.